Ever since I was a kid, seeing movies and TV shows for the first time in my then short life, I was always fascinated by the sheer creativity of everything I saw on the screen. From the big screen movies like Jurassic Park with its what I truly thought were real life dinosaurs at the time, and The Terminator, which had me genuinely gripping my seat as I was watching it, all the way to animation and the beautiful art style of both Western animation and anime movies. I was irredeemably hooked. There were times of plenty and times of joy. Me and my friends enjoyed almost every new show that came out, taking particular interest in the fantasy and sci-fi genre. As I was living in a post-Soviet country, many of the TV programs didn't become available for much later in time. Shows like the original Star Trek series or the original Star Wars movies started being shown on TV well into the late 90s. Back then, I didn't care where it came from, nor did I have any concepts of what an adaptation or a remake was. I was simply a kid enjoying myself in front of a TV screen. But as I got older, I started learning the different concepts of what and how a movie or a TV show was made. I discovered things like source material, book origins, comic books, and information regarding the things that I had already watched, at the growing popularity of video games, and even more the personal computer that allowed you to play what were considered the very best of them, and the information whirlwind I was in was at its highest peak. As time passed, I learned more and more about the origins of the stories, the source material, the creative takes the creators of the show took, and this naturally led me to be more critical and somewhat picky as to what to watch or continue to watch. For when a mind knows more about the storyline, it would naturally want to see as many things it considered fascinating presented on the screen. It was around that time that I was introduced to Lord of the Rings. Not the books, mind you, the movie trilogy. And when I say introduced, I want to clarify that it was shown to me sometime after the first two movies had already been released. Lord of the Rings came out at a weird time in my life and somehow it initially passed over my head completely. But with the third movie close to being released and my friends screaming at me to watch it, I finally set my gaze on it. So I sat down and I started watching. And for the next 6 hours, I did not so much as flinched from my bed, watching and consuming every second of what was happening in front of my eyes. It is safe to say that I felt like I have been walking blind for 2 years and that I finally saw the light. And after seeing the third movie later on, I knew that I had witnessed something that would be remembered for ages to come. Fast forward 20 years and I'm sitting here finishing this intro monologue script. And if you're still here, I thank you. It was a bit long, but it felt like it needed the introduction. See, Lord of the Rings is not just a great trilogy or a great set of movies. It's not just the groundbreaking thing that it was when it first released. For me, Lord of the Rings is a step-by-step lesson as to how an adaptation must be done. A quick Google search reveals that currently around 52% of all films are adaptations from either comic books, novels, or even games. And while this course of action has been the way things have been made for literally since the very beginning of movie making, I can't quite help but feel that the quality and the effort has been dwindling for the past 10 years. See, adaptations for me are something very tricky, even though they're the most popular format to make movies or TV series or even games at present day. And while still most of the adaptations are good at least, none of them quite reached the bar that Lord of the Rings set when it was released. See, when you read a book or a comic book or manga or any sort of original material and then a studio decides to do an adaptation for it, as a fan you already know which things made the most impact for you. And in almost all the cases, those are the characters, the setting, the storyline, the action, the balance, and the overall feel of what you consumed in that format. So naturally, what the movie creators should do is also consume that format and also pull out the most important aspects of that story and present it in a very good way on the screen. And they've done that. In almost all of the cases, they have done that by a greater level or a lower level. They have adapted the characters that we love from all formats and they have presented them on the screen, sometimes more faithful, sometimes not so faithful. And while none of this is concrete lessons of how to do an adaptation, it certainly helps to have something as familiar as possible to what the people either imagine or have seen in official artwork. And this is where Lord of the Rings basically sets the bar for what an epic adaptation should look like. See, Lord of the Rings, the trilogy books, is over 1,000 pages long. It includes so much story and so much content that 3 movies, even as long as they are, could not fill all the information in those books in a quality format. So here's where the first issue arises when doing an adaptation. You should leave some stuff out, and leaving some stuff out in a smart way is tricky. You have to know and understand what is more crucial to the story, what will drive the story better, and what would drive the story backwards, and it's not needed in a movie adaptation because it won't be appealing to the viewers. And when you read Lord of the Rings and when you watch the movies afterwards, you don't actually miss anything in terms of story, in terms of content, in terms of presentation of the world that you have read about. And while someone will say, yeah, but they didn't include Tom Bombadil, they didn't include the burning of the Shire, even though they shown it in the Mirror of Galadriel, those things are cut out for a reason. Whether everyone will like it or not, it's a gamble, but in this case, it worked because while you read The Burning of the Shire, you read about it and you see it and you want to see it in the movies, it's not crucial to the story because it's more like an additional story, and you would know that this wouldn't be included, or at least not in that format, by the start of the 3rd movie when you see what happens to Saruman. And while some people would love to see that onto the screen and would love to have that additional information, when you watch the entire trilogy and when you see how the scenes are played out, how long each setting is, how long each battle, each chapter of that is adapted from the book is, you start to feel that sense that everything is perfectly aligned in both time, in both intensity, in both visual adaptation, and you don't miss them. You sit there and you watch a 3-hour and longer movie and you don't feel it because it's so capturing, because the balance of every scene, of everything that you see from the books or even some creative adaptations are put together perfectly. And that's one of the lessons that Lord of the Rings teaches, the balance that you have to maintain. And that balance comes from knowing your material, by deep diving into the lore, by studying everything that there is to study for that book. A lot of people think that they can simply read a book and do an adaptation about it without deep diving into the heavy story. There are also those people who don't know anything about the format that they're adapting and they think, I'm just gonna do my creative spin on it. And that's how we get movies like The Last Airbender and Dragon Ball Evolution. There are also people who read and study the entire lore, but they also want to have their creative spin on everything. And that's how we get the American version of Death Note. See, when adapting things to the screen, you can always have creative input. It's also good to have a bit of your own spin on it. Legolas did not skateboard with an orc shield down the stairs in Helm's Deep in the books, but he did so in the movie. Was it a good scene? Yeah. Was it in the book? No. But that's something Peter Jackson put in the movie, and it was awesome. It didn't take away from the story, it was just a cool addition in the midst of battle to have something epic to scream about. And that leads me to my other point. When you are doing creative input, it is important to not deviate from the main storyline, to not impact the progress of the action, the progress of a dialogue, or the overall progress of a scene, or even deviate from the story as a whole. And while we have a lot of additional creative input in terms of additional scenes or change scenes in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, it never really felt that they are separating from the story or they're changing the story as a whole. What I'm talking about is an issue with a lot of adaptations lately. I've seen it all the way back to some of the Harry Potter movies, because as the books came rolling more and more and were adapting the storylines of those books, the books themselves became larger and larger with a lot more story and a lot more pages. And while the first two movies were amazing, from the third movie afterwards, they started changing and cutting a lot of things. And while some of the things were definitely unneeded, there were several times where a story was left hollow or badly explained because just of cutbacks to the story in order to make it into a reasonably long movie. Which leads me to another lesson that Lord of the Rings has presented us. Longer movies are good if they're interesting enough. You can watch the entire trilogy from dawn to dusk and not leave your couch, and I can promise you that you would not feel that you have wasted your time or that it's too long or that it's dragging along, because from the first movie, from the beginning of the first movie right until the very end, you are entangled with a mix of action, dialogue, sad moments, happy moments, exposition, and plots, additional information, and everything mixes so well that you always feel like you want to see more. It's like a drug. You want more and more and more, and you don't want it to end. Several TV series have that effect, and the first one that pops into my head is actually Dexter. When watching Dexter, every episode ends on a slight cliffhanger, and that cliffhanger is done so well that it makes you want to immediately turn on the next episode and the next and the next. And when you come to your senses, it's already the next morning. You have watched 16 episodes and you don't know what to do with your life, and you have work in 2 hours. Same thing with Supernatural. Supernatural always ends on a slightly mixed note. It has very few truly happy ending episodes. I've said that in my Supernatural review. And the storyline progresses in such a way that it makes you want to watch the next episode and the next and the next just to see what will happen. And mind you, those are 15 seasons of over 20 episodes of 50 minutes each, and it doesn't get boring. Me and my wife, we watched the 15 seasons in, I think, 2 months, and we were drained, but we were so happy because we got to see it, and we got to see it for the second time afterwards, and it was the same amount of thrill and good emotions that we felt from the TV series. We even saw some things that we didn't notice in the first time that we watched it. And it's the same thing with Lord of the Rings. It doesn't matter how many times you watched. You know the story. You know everything that is going to happen. You know every single line that a character is going to say. I've seen those people that do that, and it's still interesting because the way it was made, the balance that it presents as a whole is so addicting that you want to see it again and again, and every scene fills you with a certain emotion because it's presented so well. That all comes from the knowledge that the people who made it have, that comes from the vision of Peter Jackson, who knows how to do that and to present the emotion from the books in a very specific way. And that leads me to the third lesson that Lord of the Rings taught us, and that's casting. The crucial role of having the best and the most well-presenting cast that you can have to represent those characters from the book. You've probably seen a lot lot of polls with actors like Robert Downey Jr., Chris Hemsworth, or even now Henry Cavill. When someone says, I don't care who plays him next or who plays the character next, he is my Iron Man, he is my Superman or Geralt, and he is my Thor. That's what happens when you land the perfect casting choice. And I think there isn't a single bad casting choice in the Lord of the Rings. Anytime you see any of the characters, you immediately know that they're from Lord of the Rings, and you immediately go, oh, he's Aragorn, oh, he's Boromir, oh, Frodo, oh, Gollum. And you've seen most of these people in a lot of different movies, especially Sean Bean. You've seen him in countless other movies. You also know him from Game of Thrones, where he plays an amazing role, but still, the very first thing that pops into your head, or at least in mine, is that he is this character from Lord of the Rings. That's because when you combine all the things that I've said up until now and mix them with the perfect casting to carry out all the story, all the adaptation creativity, and infuse them with the love of doing what they're doing, that's when you have the gem. The absolute perfect diamond of a movie or a movie trilogy that would ever exist. Normally, I would end the video right now because I would love to end on a high note, and reviewing Lord of the Rings has been a dream of mine for a long time. However, this is not the main topic of the video. The main topic of the video is that the lesson that Lord of the Rings taught us over time has greatly been ignored or even lost. For the past decade, I have noticed that adaptations have become, for the lack of a better word, lazy. And by lazy, I mean that it doesn't seem that even the creators or the actors put that same amount of dedication or love into what they're doing for that franchise. While you still have a lot of Marvel movies and TV series that did do good right until the end game, in my opinion, there has been an increasing number of adaptations that are just sloppy. And by sloppy, I mean that it seems like it was just a hot mess put together by someone and presented as a movie to make a quick buck out of the name it was presented. You've seen this in some of the Transformers movie, who completely abandoned storyline and character development and just focus on sheer explosions. And while they did make money, they had so much source material that they could have adapted in a amazing way that it's just a shame. You also have shows like The Witcher that started okay. It had a ton of creative inputs, but they were okay at the beginning and then completely ruined everything from the second season afterwards. Not to mention that you have sequels to already established TV shows like the last season of Dexter, who completely destroyed everything that it was built before that. And I don't think I even need to mention the Amazons through Rings of Power, which is one of the biggest perversions of Tolkien history and Tolkien lore in existence. And I've started thinking why this is happening. Why have things progressed in such a bad way? Especially with the amount of money that are spent on these adaptations nowadays. Why are things becoming worse and worse? It's concerning because the lesson that Lord of the Rings put out there in the early 2000s is still there. You still can watch the movie, you still can watch the behind the scenes, you can watch all the interviews, all the cast interviews, the interviews with Peter Jackson. You can read all about the movie making process and you can follow those teachings and simply do that. One of the reasons that I think is plausible for the decay of adaptations is that a lot of movie studios and creators just want to adapt it to their own vision or make it for modern audiences. And they want to input things that weren't originally in the show. However, the things that they want to put are basically main things that are in the original work, and they want to change that. And when you change a core aspect of the work that you're adapting, you're changing the entire work. And when you change the entire work, it's a lot harder to adapt it correctly, because you can't just plaster something absolutely different and then expect the rest of the world that you're adapting to move forward the way you like it. I can once again give the example with Dragon Ball Evolution and Avatar The Last Airbender. Especially in Dragon Ball Evolution, you have such a massive world to adapt, such a long-lived storyline that you can adapt, and a single movie will adapt just a small portion, just a single or two at most sagas from the original TV show, and all you had to do was be faithful. And what did they do? They completely changed everything, leaving just the bare bones of what Dragon Ball is about, having Dragon Balls and having to make a wish. That's it. Everything else was either twisted and perverted, or it was changed entirely. And now the same is going on with Amazon's Rings of Power. Now, things there are a little bit more complicated. They don't have the rights to a lot of the works, they only have the rights to the appendixes, but even attempting to adapt the first and second age of Middle Earth without the proper information and the proper rights to it just means that you're going to fail. And they have failed tremendously, changing characters, changing their arcs, changing their personality, and all in the guise of making someone stronger, or someone a boss, or someone having the strength for everything. It's just disrespectful, and it's disrespectful to the fans and to the work. And when you have a fan base as big, as vibrant, and as absolutely dedicated as Lord of the Rings fan base, you should know not to mess with what we love. And it was shown. It was shown in the reviews, it was shown in the decreased watch time, and how nobody will watch season 2, and how this show, with always its expenses, will fail miserably. All of this because you didn't have the vision to do it, all because you want to adapt it for modern audiences and what you wanted to do for yourself, and to think that you're actually better than Tolkien in storytelling. See, the final lesson that Lord of the Rings taught us when making adaptations is having respect for the source material and respect for the author. And when you don't have that respect, when you don't want to present his works in the best way that they would have presented it, and just want to cash grab on the name that was already established a long time ago, that's when you fail. Lord of the Rings didn't do that. Lord of the Rings respected every part of Tolkien's message and how he presented what he was seeing and what he wanted to write. That's why everything in Lord of the Rings is so memorable even after 20 years, and why we still go and see the movies on cinema, or we see them in concerts, or we binge watch them, or we learn the language, or we read and reread the books. That's something that is for the ages. This is truly an absolute gem of a trilogy that should still be a lesson to everyone who wants to make a great adaptation. This should be a cornerstone, and it should be something to be taught in filmmaking lessons. This is what you need to know and need to research when attempting to make an adaptations of anything, because this didn't happen by accident. The most successful trilogy of all time with an immortal influence in the movie industry did not happen by accident. This happened when you had the knowledge, the respect, and the vision to do it in the best way possible, and to do it with the sheer intent of accurately presenting what you're adapting. And I'm sure that we will get more Lord of the Rings adaptations in the future, and I just hope that they listen to the lessons that Lord of the Rings has given them through time. If they do that, they would succeed, in my opinion. If they want to take the road of Rings of Power, then we already know the answer to that question, don't we? Anyways, this is all I have for today. It's a longer video, and I wanted to make it for a long time, so if you have watched this far, thank you for sticking by. Please leave your comments and your opinions and everything you want to pour out of your soul down in the comment section. If you enjoyed or did not enjoy, press the like or dislike button, follow me on my socials, and if you enjoy and want to see more of my content, simply click the subscribe button. It's free and I would appreciate it very much. Thank you, cheers, and stay fresh.